All right. Well, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome. My name is Anthony Chow. I'm the director of the School of Information, and we are honored at San Jose State to sponsor this event. The name of our celebration and symposium is Women Who Advocate for a Brighter Future. And again, I want to thank all of you who have joined us today for this important conversation and celebration. At the iSchool, we believe librarianship is not just about access to information, it's about advocacy, equity, and transforming lives. Today's theme highlights the critical role women play in shaping that future across our profession and communities. And we were just talking about that before we began. Women have long been the backbone of libraries, but most importantly, they have been champions in advancing literacy, intellectual freedom, and ensuring that all communities, especially those historically underserved, have a voice and access to opportunity. Today's symposium brings together incredible leaders who are not only advancing the field, but actively redefining what it means to serve, teach, and lead in libraries through innovation, instruction, and community engagement. We're especially honored to welcome our keynote speaker, Eryn Duffee, president of the Washington Library Association, along with our distinguished panelists, Tien Triggs and Elizabeth Roberts, who will bring their expertise and real-world impact to this conversation. As you listen today, I encourage you to think about your own role as students, professionals, and advocates in continuing this work. Advocacy just doesn't happen at the national organizational level. It happens every day in every interaction in every community we serve. Finally, thank you to everyone who has helped us organize this event, including Cadence, and to all of you for being here. Your presence reflects a shared commitment to building a more inclusive, equitable, and brighter future through libraries. Next, let me introduce you to our keynote speaker and good friend fellow rabble-rouser over the years. She is the president of the Washington Library Association and is a school librarian at Edmonds Heights K-12 School. She's a recognized leader in library advocacy at both the state and national levels, and she has contributed to national conversations through her work with ALA and the American Association of School Librarians, advancing efforts around intellectual freedom, equitable access, and library ecosystems. We helped write a book together. Through her work, Eryn champions innovative library services and supports students, educators, and communities in navigating an evolving information landscape. And I forgot to mention, I'm president of the California Library Association, and so I look forward to working with Eryn as the president of the Washington Library Association and continuing to support libraries. So with that being said, Eryn, take it away.
Thank you, Dr. Chow. That was a really warm welcome. I appreciate it. And that heavy mantle is a little heavier, but I'll do my best. So thank you, my fellow rabble-rouser. Thank you all for being here today. I am grateful for your time and this opportunity to share my story with you and to introduce you to dear friends and fellow rabble-rousers, Tien and Elizabeth. I'm going to start by saying something that I think everyone here probably knows, but libraries don't just hold stories. They don't just hold information. The women in libraries in particular, but the people in libraries hold people. They hold space. They hold community. And that's what we are here to celebrate, is the women in librarianship as community builders and storytellers. So I'm going to tell you about the women who built my life and how that becomes advocacy and how that advocacy shapes the future for all of us and our communities. I'm going to start by telling you about my grandmother. When I was little, I could not say the word grandmother, so I called her Dranmama, and that has been shortened to Dran. And Dran is my person. She is the one who has been there for me from day one and is still there for me today. She is grounding and supportive and witty and funny. And she was my gateway to stories. When we were together and I was a child, we would love to make up stories together, no matter where we were, what we were doing. We would sit on the back porch time after time and drink black coffee and watch the birds that would come to feed at the bird seed that she would put along the patio. And we would make up stories about these birds, where they were coming from, where they were going, who they were friends with, who they weren't friends with, who they were dating. We observed them and watched them and created these lives for them out of those observations. We did the same thing when we were on road trips together. We would go, I grew up in Mississippi. We would go to North Mississippi, where we had a little piece of land that was there for us grandchildren to just be wild and feral and dirty and fish in the catfish pond and build large campfires, which, by the way, my grandmother was the best fire builder in existence, probably still is. Haven't been around one of her bonfires in a while. But we would go, and on the road up there, we would tell stories about the truck drivers and the 18-wheelers beside us, or the families that were pulled over at the Stuckey's where we got gas and looked at the hats and all the fun things in the store. And making those observations and experiencing that shared creativity together was really formative for me. Taught me that everything had meaning and people were worth understanding. And before I ever stepped into a library outside of my neighborhood library, where I would go get Nancy Drew books, I learned that something that I didn't have language for at the time. Stories are how we make sense of each other, and they're how we build connection. They're how we hold memory and how we create belonging. And so when I think about what we do now as librarians, what my life has become and what I dedicate my energy to, it goes back to that. It goes back to serving our communities and being the storytellers and the story holders for those communities. And so Dran was a big part of that first piece of the journey before I even realized it was a journey. And then many years later, in my 20s, my story picks up with my former mother-in-law, Lucy Dixon, who was in her 40s at the time, and she went back to school and got her undergraduate degree in library science. Immediately the next semester, started her master's degree in library science, got her job, and then did her national boards. She just went from 0 to 100 without stopping. And I was right there alongside her, seeing her boxes of materials for her national boards and attending her graduation and celebrating with her and learning what it means to be a school librarian. And it tickled my brain a little bit. And I thought, what she gave me wasn't just an example of perseverance, of new beginnings, of the strength that women can have, the resolve that we can have when we set our mind to something. What she gave me was permission. It was permission to start something new, to care deeply about my work, and to believe that I could have an impact on the world around me. Lucy invited me to my first library conference, the Tennessee Association of School Librarians, before I started grad school, before I got the job as a library assistant at a local elementary school. She just said, "Come with me, see what you think. I think you'll enjoy it." And that opened the door. I remember sitting in those sessions, listening to the librarians and authors speak, and realizing this is a path. This is a life, and this is something I could belong to. So Lucy didn't just change her life. She changed what I believe was possible for mine. And for that, I'm grateful. So with that, I did get my first job as a library assistant in an elementary school, where I became very good at covering paperback books in vinyl laminate, um, and figuring out how to use Follett's spine label creation system. And then I applied to grad school and I got in. I attended University of Southern Mississippi. Um, and while I was in grad school, I had started paying attention to what I was seeing in the news around libraries, around intellectual freedom, and I saw that the prisoners in the United States were losing their right to read. They were having to purchase Kindles. They were having to purchase books by the word. They were being restricted on what they were allowed to read. And this bothered me, but I didn't really know what to do about it. So I typed up this email, ALA, what are you doing about the prisoners' rights to read? And sent it off. I don't even know which email address I sent it off to, but someone at the organization. And I get an email back from Jeremy Johansson, actually, saying, "Hi, Eryn, you should join the Committee on Library Advocacy." Okay, sure. So I joined ALA's COLA, Committee on Library Advocacy, and that was really another one of those pivotal, life-changing moments. I wasn't sure what I was in for it, but I knew a door had been opened, and I wanted to step through it. It was at COLA at the ALA conference in DC, I believe, where I met Dorcas Hand. And meeting Dorcas was another pivotal moment, because so I show up to this committee. I was out of my depth. I was a grad school. I knew how to cover books in vinyl. I knew which books I liked that were on the elementary shelves. I could put things in alphabetical order. But like that was kind of where I was at, right? And I was surrounded by people who had been doing this work for decades. They'd been doing the librarianship work. They'd also been doing the advocacy work, and they'd done amazing things. There were professors, there were award winners. They were phenomenal, and they introduced themselves. And I was like, "Hi, I'm Eryn. I'm in grad school." And I felt out of place, but I wasn't made to feel out of place. I was made to feel welcome. I was made to feel capable. And I was made to feel that I was enough, that really the magic, the secret was just showing up. And that's a message that I try to share forward to others and that I bring into my work when I'm advocating with librarians, when I'm bringing librarians into leadership roles, is that it's just showing up. You've got the secret sauce already. You've got what it takes. So Dorcas did that for me. She didn't wait for me to feel ready. She brought me in anyways. And then she invited me to this COLA subcommittee on ecosystems work. Yes, I said. Did I know what ecosystems work meant? No, I did not. In fact, it took a few meetings for me to even get my head wrapped around it. But Dorcas brought me in. She mentored me. She explained it to me. She showed me the work, showed me my place in that work. And we worked together to bring librarians across the silos of our different fields into coordinated, sustainable advocacy. And we did this with many other women and a few men. It was Dorcas and Sarah Kelly Johns and Michelle Roberts that I have been working on this ecosystems work with since 2019. First as a committee who just wanted to get the word out about these tools, and then as presenters at different conferences, and then publishing the book that Dr. Chow contributed to that he mentioned earlier. And during that time, Dorcas, Sarah, and Michelle became more than colleagues. They became more than mentors. They became my very close friends. My anchors and my support system. Because at the same time I was building my professional identity, I was also rebuilding my personal identity. After leaving a tumultuous marriage, I needed to find a career for myself. I had been a nurse in the past, but that was not the field for me. I had been a stay-at-home mom, and that was no longer viable. And I was on this journey of figuring out who I am and what I'm capable of, what my support system looks like. I built a new support system and what I wanted to do, what kind of impact I wanted to have on the world. And Dorcas, Sarah, and Michelle not only taught me how to be a librarian, not only taught me how to be an advocate, but taught me really what it means to be a strong woman, a woman who stands on her own 2 feet, but with her arms linked with other strong women, creating a web that supports not only ourselves, but our families, our schools, our communities. And that was nothing short of phenomenal and a gift that I will be grateful for always. So, what I came to understand through this is that the work we do in libraries is not separate from the work of being human. The skills we use every day as women, listening, holding complexity, making space for difficult truths. These are the same skills that help people build their lives. These are this work that building libraries does for our communities, and they're not that different. So I didn't find my voice alone. It was handed to me by women who assumed I would use it. And then with that gift, I have been able to lift others, which has been an amazing honor. So after that chapter, I moved to Washington about 5 years ago. I had been involved in advocacy work in Tennessee where I was living, and I was ready for a change. I was ready for mountains and sea. Um, and a few months after moving in December of 21, I was at the Washington Library Association conference. And I spoke about the book challenges in Tennessee and how we fought those challenges. They were coming at us from school boards, from legislation, from people just writing in the press, from organized astroturfed groups of people who claim to be concerned parents, whose name I will not mention. But I saw it and I saw that it was not just a regional issue. It was not something that was going to just be a problem in the South. And in coming to Washington, I noticed that there was this lack of recognition of the immediacy of the issue. And so that's what I was speaking of. And then after that talk, I was approached by 2 women, Elizabeth Roberts and Sarah Logan, who have become my closest and dearest friends, my girl squad, um, who lift me up and sometimes pull me back down to earth when needed and keep me moving forward. But they came up to me, and Sarah walked up to me and said, "Hi, I'm Sarah. That was amazing. We need you in WLA leadership." Her first words to me. And she, if you know Sarah, is a force of nature. And she is bright and boisterous and energetic and does not want to take no for an answer. Elizabeth is quieter and more grounded. She's the one that keeps the Sarah and Eryn balloons from floating off into space at times. Um, but together, the 3 of us really became a team. Now, we worked closely with other people within WLA and within the state of Washington, but we really held each other up and supported each other and created a plan for Washington libraries when it came to advocacy. And I'm really honored to be a part of that. And we built something together. So we stepped into advocacy work that took us to the state capitol, to meetings with the OSPI, the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction, into union spaces, into conversations with the Attorney General's office, into the Washington PTSA conference, to AASL, to as many places as we could to get our voices heard, because we knew that we were fighting for something important. And also to bring others into this work and lift them up, because the work's exhausting. It's frustrating these days. It's slow. It requires tenacity and patience, some stubbornness. It requires a community. And this work here in Washington often coincided with the slow, exhausting work of making a home, stability, life, and future for myself and my two children, as well as establishing myself in the school library where I work. And in the moments when it was too much, when I was spread too thin, the women who surround me, Sarah and Elizabeth and others, have said, rest, take care of you. We've got this, and the work will still be here when you return. This support, this permission to rest, has been nothing short of life-changing, because after a decade of deconstructing, rebuilding, defining for and fighting for the life that I wanted for myself and my children, it was nothing short of revolutionary to be told that I could rest, and the network of caring, capable women would support me. They would continue the work, and they would never for a moment judge me for needing to step back. So this idea that the work is a relay, not a marathon, has really stuck with me. We can't run it alone, but we can turn to each other, and we can carry each other, and thereby carry our whole communities further. And that's the magical power that comes from women who are given the space to lead, to support, and to love. And there are people who take that urgency and build something that can last. So this is where Tien comes into our story. Tien works at the state library, and she has shaped her role into something much bigger than it might have been on paper. She's an advocate, she's a developer, she's a supporter of school librarians, she's a zine editor, she is a button maker, she's a sticker connoisseur, she's a cheerleader, she's a do the work in the background kind of woman. And she does it all with a smile and an encouraging word. She takes that advocacy and turns it into something positive and sustainable and scalable. She and Elizabeth both bring joy into hard spaces. They bring encouragement when things feel stuck, and just enough sass to keep things honest. If some of us create momentum and some of us keep things grounded, Tien and Elizabeth both build that structure that lets this work continue. And that's what community building looks like at scale. By creating those conditions for long-term change and supporting each other and continuing the work and creating that sustainability so that these momentums that we build, this impact that we have, continues beyond us in time, in space, and in impact. So this work, the libraries, storytelling, advocacy, it's not separate from my work of sharing the joy of reading with children. It's not separate from my work of teaching my students those media literacy skills that help them navigate all the things, as we like to say in our meetings. It's the infrastructure to our communities, and libraries are the infrastructure to our communities. Because when people have access to information, the ability to navigate it, the exposure to stories that build empathy, everything changes. We don't just get individuals succeeding, we get communities rising together. And we're all boats on this rising tide, but only if there are people doing the work of raising the water. And in my life, over and over again, that work has been done by women. My grandmother, who taught me the power of story. My high school librarian, who gave me access and trust and a safe space to be. And those Oprah Book Club books from the 90s. Do you remember the ones? They were all very dark and depressing and a little gritty. And I loved them. And she had every one of them in the library. And I'm pretty sure I was the only one reading them. But those books turned me into a reader and showed me books' power. And then from Miss Cross, my mother-in-law, who showed me the path, my mentors, who helped me build a voice, to Sarah and Elizabeth, who pulled me into action, to Tien and Malin and so many others who build the systems and sustain it. And so to all of you here today, I want to say you don't have to wait to be ready. You don't have to wait for permission. You don't have to have the credentials to care, and you don't have to do this alone. So say yes before you feel qualified, and pay attention to who you're pulling in around you and in front of you and behind you, because the future of this work and the future of our communities depends on people who are willing to show up, willing to make space, and to build something bigger than themselves. And I'm leaving a portion of the story to Elizabeth and Tien because I want them to talk about the further work we've done with NWLA. But it's amazing and such a privilege to be a part of what continues to happen here in Washington. So I implore you to find your tribe, to support them and let them support you, and together to pick up that baton, run that relay race, continue the story, do the work, and invite others into it, because someone you may never meet could be counting on it. So with that, it is my great honor to introduce to you my dear friend, Elizabeth Roberts.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Eryn. So thank you for everyone for being here, just like others have said. And thank you to San José State iSchool for creating this space and this conversation. I'm going to be telling kind of a different story to Eryn, but it's amazing. Like she's mentioned we are good friends and close allies and advocates. And you're going to see a lot of parallels or reflections of what she said and what I'm going to share. But I promise we did not plan this. Like she just invited me and I was like, okay, what am I going to say? So it's great to see that those things reflected. So I'm just going to say, like, when we talk about advocating for a brighter future in librarianship, I want to start by grounding that idea in something very real and very specific. And for me, a brighter future looks like this. It looks like every student in every school has access to a certified teacher librarian. And that means not just a room for books, not a space for that's occasionally open, not just someone covering the library when schedules allow, but a fully supported library program led by someone trained to teach information literacy, inquiry, research skills, and a love of reading. Because that's what this work is really about. It's not about managing books, although that's part of our job. It's about teaching students how to think, how to question, how to explore, and how to see themselves as capable learners. And we know from research that schools with certified teacher librarians see better outcomes, better grades, higher test scores, stronger graduation rates, all those things. But to be clear, that's not the reason I do this work. It's not the reason I'm a librarian. It's not the reason I'm an advocate. The reason I do this work is not just about all those research things, but it's about students. So there are two types of students that I think about. Sorry, I don't know if you can hear my kids in the background. I don't think you can because Zoom is really good, but like they're very distracting me. So there are two types of students I think about all the time when I think about why this work matters to me and why advocacy is important. The first is a student who do not think that they are readers. You probably know those students. Sometimes they are struggling readers. Sometimes they can read just fine, but they've decided for whatever reason that reading is not for them. And they'll tell you confidently, I don't like reading. We've all had those students, right? Or friends or whatever it is. Could be adults in your lives. And what they often mean is, I haven't found anything that feels like it belongs to me. So in my library, I work very intentionally to challenge that thinking and to really change that experience. I create a space that feels open and welcoming. I set the expectation that reading is part of what we do, but I also make sure that there's space for students to explore what they are interested in, not just what they think adults expect them to read. That's a big thing that drives me crazy personally. And when a student is struggling to find something, I don't just point them to the shelves, right? I don't just say, oh, there's a million books here. Go find one, right? I slow down and I ask them questions. What do you like? What do you do outside of school? What do you watch? What do you play? What makes you laugh? What are you curious about? Sometimes that takes time. It takes a long time. And in case of an elementary teacher librarian, weeks, months sometimes, right? Every week I might ask them a little bit more and get a little bit more out of them. But when the student does find that book they actually want to read and they read it, that moment matters because it's not just about the book, it's about identity. They start to shift from I'm not a reader to maybe I just haven't found the right thing. And that's powerful change. And that is advocacy too. Not at a podium, not in a meeting, not in those small intentional moments but in those small intentional moments that change how students really see themselves. They can see themselves as readers. The second student I think about is the one who doesn't quite fit in anywhere else. The student might be struggling socially. They might not connect with their peers. The student who's trying, but not always successfully, to figure out where they belong. I have a student right now. I'm just going to call him B, but he loves helping in the library. Like he will come every day. When I first started organizing my library helpers, I call them friends of the library. I got that idea at a conference. I was just trying to organize everything and like get all the applications and figure out how I was going to do the schedule. And he would show up every day at recess. Can I come help today? Can I come help today? And so everyone else, I've got them on a schedule. They come every once in a while. He comes every day. He's kind. He wants to contribute, but he does struggle with boundaries sometimes. He doesn't always fit in easily into the classroom space or with his peer groups. But in the library, he has a role. He helps, he contributes, he's a part of something. And I've been able to build a relationship where we can talk about expectations, where I can support him, and where he feels successful. For that student, the library is not just about reading, it's about belonging. It's about having a place in the school where he is seen as capable and valued. And without a certified teacher librarian, without someone intentionally creating that space, that opportunity might not exist in that same way. By the way, he is in a class of 36 fifth graders, 36 kids in one class. So I don't blame him for not knowing how to fit into the ruckus, crazy. His classroom teacher is amazing, but there's so many kids there. It's crazy. But I'm glad that he's found a space in our library to like really feel connected and help out. So Those are the students I carry with me into this work because when we talk about advocacy, it can sometimes feel abstract, but it's not abstract. It's about whether or not those students have access to those experiences, right? So for me as a school librarian, that's really where my focus is. So early in my career, I did have an experience that really shaped how I think about advocacy. I was fairly new to my district and maybe 1 or 2 years in when our district level library leadership position was going to be eliminated after a retirement. Judy was an amazing leader, a mentor to many librarians, and she was just fantastic. And upon her retirement, they decided, well, we don't really need this role anymore. But it was a critical role. It functioned as the head of library services for the district, and the plan was not to replace her with a certified teacher librarian, but instead to absorb that work into another role held by someone else without a background in librarianship. Now, I'll tell you, I've worked with him for many years. He's amazing. He's a former chemistry teacher who likes technology, and they were just going to give him the library stuff too. And as much as I appreciate him for his many skills, that was not a skill that he had. So a group of us came together, and I want to emphasize that it was a group of us. We met, we talked, we aligned on what mattered, and then we went to HR and we made our case. We explained why this role was essential, not just in theory, but in practice, how it supported librarians, how it ensured program quality, and how it created consistency across our schools. We made it clear that this was not a position that could be reassigned without consequence. And our advocacy worked. That position was posted, and eventually I stepped into that role and held it for 8 years. For 8 years, I had a seat at the table in rooms where decisions were being made. I was able to advocate, to build programs, to support librarians, and to make sure that the work that we do was visible and valued. And then recently, that position was eliminated due to budget cuts. We are now months into operating without it, and we can already feel the difference. The absence of a library voice in key decisions is clear. The lack of coordinated support is clear. And that experience also reinforced for me something important. Advocacy doesn't just create opportunities, it protects them. And when that advocacy is gone, the impact is immediate. Things change really quickly when there's no one there to support. So over time, my understanding of advocacy has changed. I've always been someone willing to step up when needed. If there was a gap in leadership, I would fill it. But earlier in my career, I often saw advocacy as something individual, something you did when necessary. What I've learned is that advocacy is not sustainable as an individual effort. It is collective work. I've had the opportunity to work alongside incredible advocates, two of whom are here with us, obviously, and people who have very different strengths. Some are direct and unwavering speakers. Eryn. Some are organizers who keep everything moving forward. Tien. Some are exceptional writers and communicators. Sarah Logan, who's not here, but who's been mentioned. All of these women have had huge impacts on me as an advocate, as someone working towards change together. And working with them has changed me. It has helped me grow in areas where I was less confident. It has shown me that it is okay to speak clearly about what matters without backing down. It has also helped me understand that I don't have to do everything myself. Advocacy is a team sport. And strong teams are built when people understand their strengths, are honest about their limitations, and are willing to learn from each other. If you are entering this work, know that you don't have to be everything, but you do need to show up. Right now, the challenges facing school librarianships are significant. This is long-term work that we are doing. It is often slow, and it can be discouraging. Despite years of advocacy, progress can feel limited. But what has changed is how we approach the work. In my state, we've learned that advocacy has to be multifaceted. We used to focus heavily on legislation. And while that work is still important and still ongoing, it's not enough on its own. Now we are working across multiple systems. We're advocating for increased state funding for education because without adequate funding, nothing else moves forward. It's really hard to advocate that we need teacher librarians in every school when schools are having to cut multiple positions across the board. So really that's our first move. We're also working with State Board of Education to improve data collection and accountability. We're advocating with credentialing bodies about who is qualified to be hired into these roles. And we are pushing for library state standard adoptions. We're advocating for dedicated leadership positions at the state level. It is complex work and it is ongoing work, and it often feels like we are hitting the same wall over and over again. But each time we do, we create small cracks. Those cracks might not seem like much, but if we keep going, if we keep adding to them, adding manpower, adding to those cracks, if we bring more people into the work, those cracks grow, and eventually that change is possible. So one of the ways that we have been working on all of those things, the list of different organizations or advocacy efforts we have done, is through the work of our OLLI, which is the Olympic Library Leadership Incubator. It's kind of the brainchild of Sarah Logan, but we've all been along for the ride. Eryn, Tien, myself, other leaders. Rachel, who is the current school library division chair, started as an OLLI participant, and it brought her into the leadership role she's in now. Malin Landis also. These are all women who are working really hard to change and to grow and to help share the workload, because what we learned early on, Eryn said, this is exhausting work. And when it's only 3 or 4 of us, it's extra exhausting. We're just constantly doing all those things. But I was able to list all those different efforts because of OLLI, because of the work we're doing to build leadership in our state. So through that program, we are recruiting new members of our state to our state organization and to our advocacy work. And a lot of those things that I mentioned came out of the work of OLLI, where we bring people together, we make sure they understand what is happening in our state, and they help us brainstorm, well, what are some things we can do to make change? So when it started out as just legislative work, like I said, there was only a couple of us and that's all we could do. But now we have this forum where we can bring people together and really talk about all the different issues and come up with all the different ways that we can advocate. We go to the State Board of Ed, we write letters, we do all kinds of things together. And it's because of all of those people coming together that we're able to do that work. So this is where you come in. Many of you are still students and you are preparing to enter the field. You are building your skills, you are figuring out where you fit. And it's very easy to think, I'll get involved later, or when I have more experience, when I feel more confident. But as you heard from Eryn, you don't need those things. Advocacy does not require 20 years of experience. You can start now. You can speak from your own experience. What was it like growing up for you? Did you go to the public library? Did you have a school library that was a benefit to you? Did you not? Those are important stories. You can ask questions. You can reach out to leaders in your state, in the national organizations, in your schools, in your public libraries. And you can support others. If you hear people doing this work, you can say, what can I do? Remember, I said that I have learned so much from other people, and I've learned that we work so much better together when we have a variety of skills. I don't have the same skills or as Eryn or Tien or Sarah, but when we all come together and we all divvy up that work, it just makes it so much easier. So you can ask how you can support. Just show up. Sometimes we just need people to sign into legislation or email someone or whatever it is. Show up. You can connect with other organizations. Eryn mentioned we reached out to PTSA. I recently went to my state union representative assembly where we pass kind of the agenda for the coming year. So make those connections with outside organizations. And you can start learning how the systems work. We're from Washington and we have our unique issues, funding issues, or how things work. We have this local control that's the bane of our existence here. That might not be where you are. You might have other issues. So figure out what are the systems in your space, in your organization, in your state, so that you know how to advocate for the things that need to be advocated for. And even if you don't become a school librarian, this still matters to you because a school library is often, not always, but often, a child's first experience with libraries. If they don't have that experience, if they don't have a library program or a librarian in that space, if they just have a warm body checking in and out, which no offense to all the amazing people who do work in libraries, because they do amazing work, but it's not always the same, right? When the expectation from outside people who don't work in the library is, oh, you just check out books. It's not the same. But if a school is the child's first experience, they don't often see the value of a library if they aren't getting that robust library program, and they might not become library users later in life. So this is connected work, whether you're in a school library, a public library, a special library, an academic library. We're all part of the same ecosystem. So why keep doing this work even when it's hard? For me, it comes back to those students I talked about earlier. It comes back to the student who didn't think that they were a reader and now does, or the student who didn't feel like they belonged and now has a place. I've seen the difference, and once you've seen it, it's very hard to accept anything less. I also find it very difficult to sit back and watch things decline when I know they could be better. If there's a gap, I feel a responsibility to step in. And maybe this is where being a lifelong reader has shaped how I see the world. We all read stories where progress is possible, where people face challenges, where things don't come easily, but they persist and eventually succeed. And that's where it matters. Advocacy is not simple, it's not quick, but it is meaningful. So if there's one thing I hope you take away from me, it's this. Start now. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to know everything. You don't have to do it alone. But you do have to participate. Find your role, find your people, use your voice, and keep going. Because those small efforts, the ones that feel like those little cracks in the wall, are exactly what create change over time. And that's how we build a brighter future in librarianship together. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and I'm so excited to hear from Tien.
Thanks, Elizabeth, and thank you, Eryn and Dr. Chow, for being part of this symposium. And before, I have a few slides, which I just feel like it's very important to just, establish my background, my family history. I love the fact that the three of us did not discuss any of what we were going to talk about today, and yet we are touching on all of each other's points here. And I am so lucky to have known these two, and Sarah, who could not be here today. I know she was like a possibly invited, and I'm a little sad that she's not here, but I am doing a lot of this work because Eryn was the one who pushed me to. I had joined the advocacy committee for the Washington Library Association, and within a few days I got an email saying, "Would you like to be the chair?" And I said, "I just joined." And then Eryn said, "Well, I'll co-chair with you the first year." And she did, and just shepherded me through the process and knowing all of these things. But yeah, she was the one who brought me in, and I stayed, and I had been active in WLA leadership before then, but the particular advocacy piece, I credit her for centering that for me, because that has always been an important part of my life. So I'm going to share with you some slides. This is the wedding day of my parents standing in the background, and my grandparents sitting in the front. This was in Vietnam. they were refugees after the war. And that's how we ended up in the United States. But I come from a family of educators and activists. My grandmother was a teacher. My grandfather was also a teacher, but he was also a labor activist who was very prominent in Vietnam. My dad didn't necessarily go that direction. That was not his original path. He was going to be a lawyer, and my mom was going to be a pharmacist, and all of that got upended with the war. And when they landed in the United States, they had to start over completely. Neither one of them had a grasp of the language of English enough to, I mean, they knew that they, one, could not afford to go to school. Two, the language barrier was at the time for them just too much. And they did what a lot of immigrants to the country do, which is just get a job, try to, support themselves, and then to eventually support the family as much as they could. So my dad became a programmer, and my mom did get into pharmaceuticals eventually, but, she spent a lot of time just taking any job possible to support my dad as he got his degree so that he could learn how to be a programmer. This is also my grandfather. I did not know the extent to which he had been working with the United States government about with labor. On the left, that's George Meany and Lyndon B. Johnson. That's my grandfather in the middle in the Oval Office. So his labor union that he had started was the South Vietnamese Confederation of Labor. And it was for just farmers and just, workers, that he was so much in support of like trying to gain rights for just regular Vietnamese people that he actually was he was disowned by his own father for being, for not following whatever path that his father had set for him. And he just like turned his back and moved to South Vietnam in the early 1900s and, started working with the people, just going out and meeting the people. He felt that was where his important work was. And on the right, I do not know who the man on the left is, but that's also George Meany. A lot of these pictures are, interestingly enough, archived in various universities across the United States. And I've only just begun uncovering some of this as part of my genealogy, my family's genealogy. But a lot of this information was kept secret from me and my siblings growing up because my parents were dealing with a lot of trauma from the war and having, left their circumstances behind, and they did not want to pass that on to us. They were raising us to be the best that we could be, but we were absorbing their values as far as education, as far as helping others, as far as taking what was our privilege and being able to get an education, being able to, they were very, very much the kind of people who believed that if you were in a position to help others, if you had any possible opportunity to have a positive influence and to connect other people, then you do that. And so I expressed at a young age that I wanted to be a teacher, and my dad redirected me to medicine. My heart wasn't there. I loved research, but my heart wasn't there. But I did follow that path. But my siblings, two of my siblings, became teachers. And I think a lot of that we owe to our grandmother, because she spent every summer teaching us. And I did not realize until very recently that the fact that I can read and write in Vietnamese, that I'm actually literate in my family's language, actually puts me in a unique position, because a lot of people that I've met my age whose families had fled in the 70s and 80s and came to the United States, they can't actually write or read in Vietnamese. And I owe that all to my grandmother trying to preserve our culture and connecting with us and letting us know that, you know, this is something that we should not hide about ourselves, that we are proud despite losing, you know, everything as a result of war. And that instilled in me this sense that, you know, who I am, a lot of what's important too is representation, because I didn't have that growing up. I grew up in Utah, where I really never saw anybody like myself. I always stood out, and I didn't have teachers who looked like me. I didn't have friends who looked like me. I didn't know anybody really who had the same background that I had. And it's because my grandmother just conveyed the sense that we should not hide who we are, and that as much as possible we should educate people, because she believed that people would appreciate that, you know, our struggles, our past, our history, our stories, if we would share them. She really believed in the goodness of people, and that would bring us together. So at some point, after I had gone off to college and decided medicine just really was not for me, and toyed with research, I was given the opportunity to, you know, go back to my first love, what I had wanted to be, which was a teacher. You know, that opportunity came up at a time when I was trying to make a decision about whether or not I would go through with graduate school or medical school. And they said, well, why don't you spend a year, you know, learning about, you know, being a teacher? We will, you know, we'll help you through this. You know, it was a local school in Baltimore. And I said, well, you know, I am not in any rush or pressure to be anywhere with my life. I am not trying to impress other people. I want to do what makes me happy and fulfilled. And I get a lot of that from my mom, because she never pushed me down any path. She would always ask me, are you doing what makes you happy? And for a while, my answer was no, I wasn't. I felt like I was walking along a path that wasn't right for me. And so teaching was exactly everything I thought it would be and more. I loved it. I worked at a wonderful school in the country to start out with before I moved on to Baltimore County and public schools, where I worked with a lot of students who really needed me, just a wide range of kids. And I am I know that I'm very lucky to have had that experience, because I think that unless you've been a teacher, sometimes you don't get how much you can change a student's life. And it's incredible, and it's so meaningful. And I mean, that's not to put like all educators up on a pedestal and that, you know, we're sacred or anything like that. But it's to say that, you know, if you are the person encouraging a student, if you are the one person that student needs in the most, it's very powerful. And you realize that it's not just about students, but you can bring that kind of power to other people. And I'm so lucky that after we moved here from Maryland to Washington, I decided to jump over to librarianship. My husband is an academic librarian who actually got his MLIS from San José State, I think about 15 years ago. He comes from a family of librarians. His mom, my mother-in-law, was a school librarian. My sister-in-law and her husband are public librarians. So we hit everything because I'm a special librarian. And I got to meet these wonderful women that you see in these pictures. This is Ollie. This is the Olympic Library Leadership Incubator. This is the group, and the picture on the left is a number of people in leadership from our second cohort from last August. And the picture on the right was a bunch of us at the WLA conference a week and a half ago. And there are so many more, but I am just so proud to stand with these women, with these people. They do incredible work, and I am always in awe of them. I can never express the appreciation I have for what they do every day, and to be astonished that anything and anyone would threaten the existence of school librarians anywhere, because they are so vital to, in my opinion, they're so vital to the development of children, of students, that outside of their work as classroom teachers, the duties and the responsibilities that they have as librarians, it cannot be replaced or substituted by anyone else who has not been trained in that role. So I'm getting to the last slide because I kind of threw these together. I'm sorry if it doesn't make a lot of sense. I just pulled pictures that I really, that bring me a lot of joy. This was also at the Washington Library Association. This is one of my mentees. I work as a mentor through the Washington Library Association mentorship program. And just to bring it back to representation, every year that I've had a mentee, each of those mentees has specifically asked for a librarian of color, because for them also to have so little experience seeing people like themselves in a profession where they want to dedicate their work. And I feel very lucky that I can be this person for them. And this year, I actually convinced one of my coworkers who had never been a mentor. I said, I can't take all of them. You need to also be a mentor. And she actually applied, and she is loving it. She said, I don't know why I didn't do this before. So I'm going to stop sharing. This, again, is just, I think about how, Eryn, you said it was Sarah who roped you in, and you roped me in. And I do a lot of the work of roping other people in. Although I don't think of it that way. I think of it as, strengthening some connections, right? These are people who were already interested. They just didn't know how to get started. And when all of us talked about this not being a single effort, it is a group effort. It is a relay. It's not a marathon. It's not about who is standing on the podium at the end. It is about every single hand that reaches out to hold each other up, to say that we did this together. A lot of my work through the Washington Library Association is focused on talking to iSchool students. In fact, I was able to finally, after almost 4 years of work, bring to fruition my dream of those of us who are working in the field, building a bridge to iSchool students so they get a chance to talk with professionals and to network with them and to experience multiple facets of librarianship. And we were invited to the UW iSchool Career Fair, where I spent 7 hours just talking to iSchool students and inviting them to events like tours and to meetups so they can talk to those of us who can tell them so much more about the profession than what you would get in a classroom. And a lot of that is about breaking down this idea that, just like what Eryn said, you don't have to wait until you have the credentials. You don't have to wait until someone says you are ready to do this. There are people who are so happy and anticipating, your graduation, the graduation of the next group of librarians, that we would be so happy to invite you into our spaces, invite you to be a part of the work that we do, but you can also direct that yourself. It doesn't have to be something that it doesn't have to be difficult. I guess a lot of what I talk about when I talk about the advocacy work that I do, both through the WLA and through my work at the state library, where I support all school libraries in Washington State, and teacher librarians, and as much as possible, trying to build a bigger presence for them in Washington State so they have a firmer foundation to stand on, is that I just think to myself that a lot of this work is really about, knowing what it is that you want and what you bring. And it doesn't have to be something unique. It doesn't have to be something transformative or groundbreaking. We value you. We value every person who wants to do this work. And so the advocacy work that I'm talking about, I realized that word, after talking with some people, it's intimidating. The word advocacy brings a lot of people have this understanding of what that means. That means they think it means being out in the street and being up front and always being the person who is pushing. You don't have to be that person if that is not the role that you're looking for. It's about recognizing that there are different levels of it. And Elizabeth said, everyone brings different strengths, and every person who joins or adds their voice to it builds that network, builds that community. And I think that I must be somewhat persuasive because our advocacy committee is growing. We have people who want to join. I love talking about it and about the work that we're doing, and we are building. Every day it's about building. And it's also about, knowing how much you can put in and pulling back. Just like Eryn says, it doesn't have to be 100% 24/7 all the time. Because when you are in that community, we're all watching out for each other. That when it becomes too much, there are people who will step in for you. That you need to realize your own value as someone very unique in each of these spaces, that you bring something, and whatever it is that you bring, we'll want it because you're contributing. And I think that's always the hard part. It's that first part of thinking that you are not up for the task, that you are not going to be as good as someone else who might be able to do it better. I really definitely, as part of this community, as part of Ollie and as part of the WLA, I have never felt like we were measuring each other by, what we were always look at how far we got this year. What can we look forward to next year? And that is a great place to be. I have to tell you that if you can be part of something where you are, you're building, that you have a chance to make something, go for it. And I mean, I cannot tell you enough that, these women had that kind of vision to say, we can do this for ourselves and we can open it up and make it larger and include others who want to even have a small part of that. And I just feel that it can be very much something that you're not thinking about right now. You may be just interested in just getting your foot in the door and get your career going, and that's understandable. That's wonderful. But build those connections now, because you never know when that opportunity comes, when you say, hey, I would love to do just a little bit more. Where do I get started? Because I am always sitting there paying attention to what people are talking about, what opportunities come up. Because while it may not be for me, I know people for whom that may be true. And it's always about building that into, your interactions with your people, is like remembering that these are people who would also benefit from your knowledge, experience, or an opportunity like that to contribute. And that's why I'm so grateful to Eryn, because I think that's how she sees it. She looks at people as, you bring something wonderful because of who you are and because of what you care about. And she wants you to be part of that. And everybody, I think, can do that, as far as like maybe personally, just a small group that can get started. Or, if you have joined your state organization for the State Library Association, find your people there. When she talks about like finding your tribe, that's exactly what it is. Maybe it's not at your school, maybe it's on that level, but there are so many ways that you can do the work now and bring your fresh perspectives. I like to think about that. Is like, we all, like I said, have such different backgrounds. And I mean, you got to see some of my background, which I feel, definitely influences so much of what I do, because I'm always thinking about my place and space within any group that I'm in, and understand that I do bring something valuable just by my identity and who I am, but I can also do more within my group of people, that these women who support me help me to do more for them in return. And that goes back to my role as the School and Digital Support Librarian of Washington State, the Washington State Library, because what I do is a little bit different than just as a librarian of a single space, is because my role is as a state level consultant. I have to keep in mind all the things that are going on in our state and all the things that are affecting that. So I work with the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction. I have monthly meetings with Leslie James, who is a former teacher librarian, who we would love to have somebody at OSPI who just works with school libraries. And her position is with, information and media literacy. And it's not necessarily, what we would are looking for. There are multiple priorities that we have to just strengthen the position of just librarians in general, but particularly because so many jobs, those are being eliminated because, part of it is this push towards deprofessionalization of librarianship, which is astonishing to me. I don't know how you do the job without all the knowledge that you are expected to take in during your graduate work, but specifically for teacher librarians who must be able to hold in their hands all the things they must do as classroom teachers, and on top of that, all the things they must do as librarians, to say that that's not important and that's a position that can be easily eliminated is, for me, one of, we're headed down the wrong path. And so a lot of my work at the state library has been to establish that space for them. The first year that I did this job was a lot of learning. And the second year I have spent reaching out to other state libraries who have state level consultants that serve school libraries to find out what they are doing in their states. And we meet quarterly to talk about the efforts that we're doing to strengthen the positions of that group, because we cannot lose school librarians. We cannot lose librarians in general, but particularly I just feel that, with the Department of Education is also, has been under fire for a while, and teachers are just as vulnerable to the kinds of decisions that work against the very communities that we wish to serve, which are students. And it definitely, it's just, if you cannot see how those consequences will compound once you start attacking one part of that, then, that's another thing that we need to be better at, is communicating our value. And that's what I'm trying to do in my position, is to communicate the value of these wonderful people that I serve, because I cannot lose them and I refuse to lose them. So, but oh my gosh, I'm sorry that I get a little bit emotional because they're incredible. Eryn and Elizabeth, Sarah, Malin, Rachel, there's so many, and we keep growing, but it also kind of feels like we are running so hard to stay ahead of where things are going that it seems like we're not running fast enough. It feels that we're barely staying, on pace with it. And in some ways, it also feels like when we get bad news from the Washington State Legislature about our funding, not just school funding, but my funding at the state library, where we had 14 people laid off last year. I'm hoping I remember the number. It was devastating. And that we are also trying to stay alive. And that's why we work so hard, is to make sure that those of you in the iSchools right now will have a place to land, that you will have a future, that you will have a chance to be part of librarianship for now and for, hopefully forever. But, that it's like we think about you. We think about the kids we serve, the people we serve, but we also think about you. And that's why I've worked really hard to remember that we can be a pipeline for all of you who wish to do more, starting now. But I know that I could speak a lot more, but I want to turn it back to Eryn, because I know that she has some things possibly that she wants to add to this.
And I've enjoyed hearing from you, and listening to your story, particularly your family's story. And as I've listened to you and Elizabeth, and we've all said this word advocacy a few times today because that is very important to the work that each of the three of us do. And I think what I realized just now, perhaps, is that advocacy for us is an act of hope. And, it's hope for a brighter future. It's hope for the opportunity to have that positive impact on the student or the patron, or, on collectively our citizenship, right? Like when we are an informed and educated citizenship, we have a more vivacious democracy. And so I want to ask the two of you, what is your hope? What do you hope for that leads you to doing this advocacy work?
I think for me, it's just like we've said that we can continue to do this job because we obviously find value in it, and we know that libraries, all kinds of libraries, have such a positive impact. Everywhere from like that one kid who found that one book to civil understanding of the way our world works and the way our government works. Like that's all and everything in between. So I think for me that hope is just keeping this work alive so that we always have libraries libraries are such a unique place and thing in our society where everyone has access to information for free. Like that's such a cool thing. And not just information, but community, like you said, right? Like, I get my monthly newsletter from King County Library, and every time I'm like, that is so cool. Like they're doing this program and they're doing that program. And like, it's not just about books. It can be, but it's also about bringing people together, about educating people, sharing skills, right? Like I love when they do like bring your old broken appliances and we're going to have experts here to help you fix your things. Like libraries are such a cool place, and that just gives me hope because that it's that sense of community and caring that we don't always see in like the politics and the big crazy things going on in the world. But like if you can just focus in on what your local community is doing, your school, your library, it's just brings joy and hope, I think.
Yeah, it's just to bring it back to my family a little bit. My dad never talked about going to the library. My mom never talked about going to the library. I don't know what libraries are like in Vietnam. I did not get my first library card till I was in second grade when my dad discovered the public library. And he took us there and he said, you can get these books for free. And I got you all library cards. And my grandmother, who was still learning English, and she loved to read. She would sit in her room and just read for hours with the few books in Vietnamese that she had. And she was trying to learn English, and she would just take us all the time. We would walk down to the local library, and that was the one place where my dad, both my parents worked full time, sometimes two jobs. When I was little, there were times that I wouldn't see them at all until late at night. And for a while, my parents were working on, opposite shifts. But on the weekends, on Saturday, my dad always made time for us, that if we wanted to go to not just our local library, but the downtown Salt Lake Library, to a library that was a branch that was far. Oh wait, this was before we discovered that we could actually do interlibrary loans. So he would drive us. He would sometimes drive us to 4 different libraries on Saturday so we could get our fill of books. And that love, just like all of us carried that. And that's why it astonishes me that there are people who never had that experience, that never got to experience the everything that is so wonderful. Because I always saw the library as that is the place that if I have a question, if I need someone there is going to be able to help me find the answer. And I know it's a lot different now where people rely on looking things up themselves, but that just does not replace the actual human being who has the skills and who can guide you to the right sources, the good things, because that can be so difficult if you don't have information literacy or media literacy or even like critical thinking skills. You desperately need a librarian. So, a lot of my hope is about realizing that they are no, librarians aren't just stewards of information. They are sharers of information. They're the ones who make sure that, if you have come with a question, they're going to do their best to get you the best possible answer. And that is really invaluable to have that person holding your hand through a research process or any of those things, because sometimes that's all you need to discover all that's out there and available to you. And I feel like my hope is that, that our citizenry, will rediscover the value of libraries and librarians, and that we serve in a way that cannot be defined by just technology can't replace us. I'm sorry. So I'll just say that right now. It will not. AI will never be as good as us. So, but yes, I would love to see that people think of us first, that, we are experts in what we do, and we're here to help you. We're, an educated, hopeful, that's the kind of future that I'm hoping for, the citizenry that makes the most use of our resources. And, they're in libraries.
And your comment about AI, it was great, and it kind of cracks me up. And I want to share a little story that gives me hope. So I am currently teaching a semester-long class at my school. I have 7 high school students that have elected to take this class with their librarian. It's a media literacy class where we tie in dystopian literature. And I'm having a blast, and these kids are so on it. I'm having to continually beef up what I'm sharing with them and make it more challenging for them, and give them the opportunity to dig even deeper because they're ready for it. And it's really amazing. And we have recently looked at kind of 2 different things. One, the social media and the lack of privacy and the use of algorithms, and how our data is being fed to these algorithms and being used to manipulate us. We did a deep dive into the Cambridge Analytica scandal, and then also looking at AI in particular, and how it's affecting our society, and how it can be a useful tool, but there's really, some concerns that we need to be aware of with it. And what gives me hope is these kids that are so savvy, that they are such great critical thinkers. They are looking at this. I mean, they're really turning it over and saying, well, it could be used like this, and I could see how maybe it's like this. And yeah, this is just going to be a part of our world, and we've got to figure out how to live with it. And they can really grapple with this aspect of it is really unethical. And, this is something that I don't want to engage with. I don't want the algorithm to be manipulating me in these ways. And I don't want it to take away my creativity and my critical thinking. And, I'm creating the space for these conversations, but really it's these kids that are like, they've got the language, they've got the understanding to have these conversations because it is native to them. And so it gives me hope that this generation that is coming up with, through all of this, shall we say, current turmoil in all the ways is really, they're aware and they're savvy in a way that I wasn't completely aware of myself until I worked with this particular group of kids. And granted, they're awesome, but I think that they're a good sample of the potential of this generation that's coming up, and that gives me hope that often change happens generationally, right? Like, and I think that the kids that are in high school and in middle school right now, they're going to be the adults that are tasked with having to kind of right this ship for us and to create these guardrails around our technology, create these guardrails around our government, and do some rebuilding. And I know that it's on us to do the work to make sure that they're equipped. And we need to keep that in our sights. And I think these kids are capable, and they're concerned and they're aware and they're so conscientious about how they walk through this world. And not just the ones that are coming to this class with me, but all my high schoolers that walk to the library. There's just such an awareness within them that I don't necessarily remember myself and my peers having just a couple of years ago when I was in high school. And so that gives me hope. And I wanted to share that. What about Elizabeth? I'm sure, and Tien, you as a teacher, you're that student, that one, and maybe you already shared yours, Elizabeth, but that student that has stuck with you and has had an impact on your librarianship, your leadership, your humanness. I would love to hear those stories, because that is where, this bigger, broader work is wonderful and it's important, but it really is those like individual connections, particularly school librarians. It's the kid, right? So I would love to hear those stories.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's lots of those students. But I think you can kind of, like I said in my talk, right? There's kind of those two different stories, and there's a lot of kids when you, or I'll say this, when you go to those library conferences and you have those speakers, I swear, like at least half of the speakers, authors often will talk about the librarian in their life that saved them, that made a difference. Um, and it's one of those things that's like hard. Like I feel like the student I have now that I talked about, I can see that this is a safe space for him and it gives him something. Um, and we don't always know who those kids are, right? Like we don't always know the impact we are having until right years later when someone might come back and say hi or tell you something. Um, so I think for me, like I'm just hopeful that there's lots of those students that I don't even realize that it's happening with. Um, and it could be a safe place. It could be making them a reader. It could be any of those situations. I didn't, you guys have both talked about going to the library growing up. I didn't actually go to the library that much growing up. I read a lot and my family read a lot. We were readers, but for some reason, I don't know why we didn't like visit the library. And I love, um, as a librarian now, trying to build that up and build that connection to library world. So like hopefully I'm having, a student who wants to get involved now realize like what a cool thing that libraries are and that they can go to them and I always try to tell my students, especially when we're working on like research skills or information literacy skills, I'm like, y'all, we're just in elementary school, but I'm telling you, you're going to use this the rest of your life. And kids will often be like, well, I'm not going to be in school forever. And I was like, it doesn't matter. Like, I'm an adult and I still use these skills. Like, every day I'm reading things on the internet or I'm doing research or whatever it is. And I think just building that, finding ways to make connections with kids is just part of what we do and why we do the work we do. And like I said, advocacy is such an important piece of our job, but because of those students and because of those stories that we know and that we don't know and that we might never know. I think those are all important things. So I don't know. I don't know if that answered your question, but that's kind of where my brain went to.
That's great. I think about, you were talking about the space, and before I moved here to Washington, I was the teacher librarian at a urban Title I school, and it was a middle school. It was fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth, and the system was failing these kids. They were in middle school, and most of them were illiterate. And that was really hard. But, I built our collection. I made it engaging, and I made sure the library was a welcoming space. I opened it up before school in the morning. Anyone was welcome in there. They could eat in there. They could be loud in there. They could just be themselves. I mean, these kids were living in multi-generational homes. Their parents were working multiple jobs. They were dealing with stressors and traumas, and then they were going into the classroom and being asked to succeed without really being given the tools to succeed. And the thing that I could do for them was to just give them a space. And so that's what I did. And it was a space with books, but it was a space where they could just be. And so they knew they were welcome there, and they would come in, and eventually it was, ooh, you want to try this Naruto? This is like that show you watch, or, oh, you like Pokemon, and it was, here, just take this book with you. Like, and they would tell me, oh, I don't read, I can't read. And I'm like, I think you can. Like, I think this is a story for you. And it got to where, and I can still hear it, and it's my favorite. These kids, they knew they had a place among the stories, and they would come in the mornings. And there was one kid, he'd come in bright and early, and I'm not a morning person, but he'd walk in, he'd be, yo, Miss Duffee, you got any more of that manga? And like, I can still hear it because there was so much joy in the stories for this kid who had told me, I'm not a reader, I'm not going to finish school, whatever those stories they had been told were, we had flipped it on its head with manga, with Pokemon and, Baruto and Amulet. And I remember talking to one of my coworkers there about this, and because he noticed that I had, created this space for these kids, and they were noisy, and it was great. And he told me something that a mentor had said to him once, and it has always stuck with me, and it has really shaped how I run my library space, no matter where I am. He said, you spend enough time in a barbershop, you're going to get a haircut. And so my goal with my students is just to make an enticing barbershop, because eventually someone's going to get a haircut. And eventually these kids are going to realize that these stories are for them and that they can find themselves in these stories. And then when they do, when they see themselves as a reader, like they see themselves as capable, right? Not just I'm capable of looking at these words on a page and decoding them. They see themselves as intelligent. They see themselves as competent. And that confidence and that hope can take them so far. And then when they get into these stories and they learn empathy and they learn to put themselves in other people's shoes and they learn that, from the experiences of the kids or the characters in the books, like that's why we do it, right? Like that's the good stuff. And so I think about my early morning manga loving little heathens having their Takis for breakfast and how much I love them. And then like I have a student at my current school. She used to get me in so much trouble with her parents because she, in the third grade, wanted to check out the Harry Potter books. And in the fourth grade, she wanted to check out the romantasy and, and so forth and so on. And she was always just kind of pushing that boundary just a little bit. And her dad would come talk to me and she can't have these books. And so we found our balance. I found the books that she could take home, and I told her all of these books are always here in the library. And, but then I worked with her and her dad and we found, and she kept reading and she kept coming back to the library. And it was years later that her dad said, before you came here and before this library, she didn't read. We couldn't get her to read anything. And now this child, I love her. She's such a little troublemaker and she's the best. And she comes and she takes home a stack of books, as low as she can hold her arms up to her chin. And she'll read literally 8 to 12 books in a week. Like it's just like she is a voracious reader. She lives for the stories. And I cannot wait to see what she does with this passion and this curiosity, and this fire that she has in her. And so even though she got me in a little bit of trouble and I had to be like, well, these books are for everyone. And if she wants to check it out, but like I said, we found that balance. But so it's those moments that like the two of you have said, really make this such an amazing field to be in, and one that I hope grows instead of shrinks, and that we can keep alive, so that other people can have the joy of being on this side of it, and so that people can have the joy of being the recipients of the gifts of the library.
So my story it's actually a family. But this is part of the reason why I started thinking about maybe eventually getting into librarianship, was because of this family. Because on the weekends, I met with Baltimore County and Baltimore City students, always at the public library. And I was working with one of my students, and I had a break in between, that student and the next student I was going to see on that Saturday. And this Korean family approached me and asked me if I worked at the library. And I said, no, I'm actually a teacher. I meet with students on the weekend. And the mother said that she didn't, she was a nurse, but, her English still wasn't very good. And her husband didn't speak English at all. And they were trying so hard to raise their kids here in the United States, but they could tell their kids were falling behind with reading and with writing, and they didn't know how to ask the school for help because she felt that they were placing them so low that they were falling behind in other things. And she wanted to know if I would take on students that weren't actually my students, actually just, to do tutoring. And I had been, a certified literacy volunteer since high school. It was actually my high school librarian who said, you are in here every day would you like to join this? Would you like to get certified and start working with, local elementary schools and middle schools to help struggling readers? And I said, I would love to, because I have a brother who struggles with reading and I work with him every day. Teach me, tell me how to do this. And so I started working with this family, and it was just, I know that part of it, again, when I bring up representation, they felt comfortable approaching me, because even though they could tell I was not Korean, that I was saying they're helping students, there was, for them, culturally, I think that a barrier that prevented them from being able to fully ask for help from their schools, which I said, I am happy to talk with the school to get them help during, this time, when they're at school, because they clearly need the support. And then it reached the point where they had cousins who were visiting from Korea in the summer. And they said, do you have time to take on, to help them? Because they're trying to learn English at their schools. And so I was working so much at the library with this particular family that I just thought to myself, my gosh, I need to think about, like, well, I love this space anyway, but the fact that I could just take them over and like show them the books and say, where do you want to start? And get them to that point where they didn't feel like they were bad students because they couldn't read as well, that they were bad students because their writing was not as good. And I'm happy to tell you that they are both successful college students. I mean, they are just a wonderful family who, they didn't know how to ask for help, but she was bringing her children to the library to give them exposure to the thing that they feared the most, which was, the reading. She just hoped that they would somehow, if they would just do it, they would get better. She didn't realize how much more help they needed. And I happened to be in the right place at the right time. But that's when I started thinking to myself, wow, I could be the person at the information desk helping these people, because if they don't know how to ask for it from their schools, I could certainly do that for them as a librarian, And so when I moved to Washington, that was part of the reason why I said, I'm going to see what library jobs are available. So I was naive. So, and I landed at the Washington Talking Book and Braille Library, which, again, serving that population, I loved working there. But it's, you don't know what's going to push you into there, but you remember the people who got you there. And it was like working with this family and getting their kids to the point where they enjoyed, they were proud of the progress they made, but I still think fondly of them. But I have a hard rule, though, that I cannot be friends with any of my ex-students on Facebook until they reach the point where they can talk to me without calling me Mrs. Triggs. But we'll get there. I hope to reconnect with them someday and let them know that they had just as much of a positive influence on my life. So
that's beautiful, Tien. Thank you. I think with that, I'm going to invite Dr. Chow back in to the conversation.
Well, thank you very much. I've really enjoyed hearing from all of you. I always reflect on, this is the 5th year we've done this, that every symposium is different. Every person that comes to these shares unique experiences. So thank you, all 3 of you, for taking the time. So as we close, I've been gathering notes, and so I want to share a few thoughts, less as advice and more reflections from your 3 panelists here, as well as some of my own experience. So I'll start with the great question of, what is your hope? I think that is a great question, that can serve as a guidepost to all of us at any given time. What is the hope? What is the future that you want to see? I like also the saying, say yes before you feel fully qualified. My goodness, I think all of us really feel have lived that. And for those of you that just beginning your career, that is really great advice. Jump in with both feet. Don't wait until you feel completely prepared, because the truth is that moment rarely comes. What you already bring, and this is kind of Elizabeth, your lived experiences, your perspective, your voice, that's real and it matters more than you think. And also, Tien, are you doing what makes you happy? And I think, again, another great question that I think really helps you decide on whether you're on the right trajectory or not. Something else Tien said, building community and knowing how much you can put into it before it becomes too much, I think is also something that probably all four of us share in terms of, that's a tough balance. There will be never enough resources, enough time, or perfect conditions. Again, I think that was shared by all three of you. That's just a reality. So if you feel that your voice should matter, if you see something that needs to change, you can't wait for someone else to step in. You have to step up. And I think, again, I heard that through all three of you. Certainly that's been my experience as well. You just got to do it. So what I share is what I heard today, and also kind of coupled in with my own thoughts. I definitely could say, as the director of the School of Information and president of the California Library Association, I've never really felt completely prepared for the roles that I've taken on or the challenges that I face. But I always try to show up. I always try to help. I always try to support others where I can. And that's really what leadership is all about. So concluding thought, lead not because you want to, but sometimes because you have to. So I want to thank all of you for sharing your time, your expertise, and I wish all of you the very best in your journeys ahead. Thank you so much.